This video is made possible by Second Call Defense. Second Call Defense provides immediate, upfront legal protection for a member who is forced to use any legal weapon for self-defense. So protect yourself today with Second Call Defense. I did. You'll find the link in the description. Hi, I'm Joel Persinger. I'm the Gun Guy. Thank you very much for all of your support of GunGuyTV and of me and everything you do to make this channel work. I'm super grateful. I've got a great beginning of the year interview with Sam Paredes from Gun Owners of California for you. However, before I get started, just a couple of things I want to mention. First of all, you might want to subscribe to the GunGuyTV Firearms podcast. It's an audio podcast that you'll find on pretty much any podcast player. It's on all of them. So find the one you like the best and do that, whether it's Spotify or iHeart or some other one I have never heard of. You'll find it everywhere. Just look for the GunGuyTV Firearms audio podcast. The reason for that is that these interviews tend to go longer than what is displayed on the video platforms like YouTube, Rumble, BitChute, and so on. And the reason for that is that when you got an hour-long thing, nobody wants to watch an hour-long video. So I generally cut them down and edit them down to about 20 minutes or less than 30 minutes. That seems to be the sweet spot that people will actually watch. And so if you're watching this video, that's why it's about that long. But there's a lot of content there you're missing, which people will consume and actually enjoy in a different format, and that's an audio podcast. So what I do is I take the long form of these and pretty much take the whole interview, and I'll just clean it up a little bit and use the audio for the audio podcast. Now, because they are an hour long, oftentimes there'll be a part one and a part two, and they'll appear in two different podcasts, but you can listen to them on your way to work or on your way home or while you're doing stuff in the garage or whatever. So I do urge you to subscribe. You'll find the audio podcast on a bunch of locations. Obviously, some of them are listed here, but there are many, many others on your favorite podcast player. It should be available. It's syndicated everywhere. The other thing I would suggest you do is check us out on these alternative locations for videos, because YouTube is very odd in the way that they limit things. I did a very harmless video recently where I encouraged people to be kind to one another. I said that was my secret weapon. Well, YouTube has demonetized it because they said that that actually violated their community guidelines. I'm trying to figure out how telling people to be kind to each other and suggesting that violates anybody's guidelines, but apparently it did violate YouTube's, and that's how quirky YouTube can be. Besides which, I urge you to check out these other locations because I think we should support those platforms that support our free speech rather than limit it. So if you have not already done so, please subscribe on one of these. BitChute and Rumble seem to be the most popular and the most functional, but the others are good too. So pick the one you like the best and do find GunGuyTV over there, because you never know what's going to happen on good old YouTube. Likewise, I'm trying to get away from the standard big tech social media stuff, so you'll discover there's some other social media opportunities here that we are part of. And certainly when former President Trump, I'm going to call him President Trump, hope you don't mind, launches his new one, I think it's called Truth Social, we will endeavor to be on there as well. All right, that's all the stuff I had to share with you. That was it, so we can get to the interview. Other than if you would like to support GunGuyTV, you can best do that by joining GunGuyTV Crew. I do post there pretty much every day, all week long. There are some days I don't, but most days I post things there, exclusive videos, the entire second section of the audio podcast, which is exclusive to crew members, and a whole bunch of other stuff. You can only get that content as a member of the GunGuyTV crew, and you can join on either Patreon or Locals. You'll find a link in the description. All right, let's go talk to Sam. Sam, my friend, thank you very much for joining me. I appreciate it. We're getting started on a brand new year, which means, I suspect, that we're getting started on probably a refresh of some old battles and some brand new ones. And the legislature, I understand, is either coming back or is back, one of the two. This begins the boxing match. What is happening in the state of California?
Well, we've already had our gloves on for a little while. The legislature, being the eager anti-gun beavers that they are already proposing new legislation, including carrying forward some of the old legislation. The only thing that we know that they for sure want to move forward to this legislative year is the excise tax on ammunition and firearms purchases. they're going to have a quite rude awakening if they continue to pursue that. They haven't been able to acquire the 2/3 supermajority in both houses in order to pass that, because there are just enough middle of the road, pro business, moderate Democrats who represent rather tenuous districts who don't want that issue to be a campaign issue during their reelection. So they have kind of held the line. Assemblyman Adam Gray being the leader, he's been a pro 2A stalwart guy. He's our lead Democrat member of the Assembly. Good guy, good staff, solid. He understands the Second Amendment. So that's the tax. Then, as a result of the Supreme Court dealing with the Texas abortion case that set Governor Newsom on his ear and ranting and raving, and of course, given that it's an abortion issue, the first thing he knee jerks to is, I'm going to apply this to guns. And so the legislature has sponsored just recently a bill that will allow firearms manufacturers and anybody in the chain of commerce of firearms to be sued for gun violence. Now, they're just taking federal law and casting it to the wind. And even though this bill has been introduced, it's a spot bill with very few details in it right now. It's bad and it's going to get worse, no question about it, as they try to figure out how to get their arms around the issue. So here in California, they want to allow people to sue gun manufacturers, but you're right, they also want to allow the government to sue manufacturers. And they're trying to be tricky-dicky. They're saying, yeah, there are some exemptions to the federal law in that if a firearms company commits a crime or does something in violation of state law, that they can be sued. Well, if they violate the law right now, they can already be sued. That right has always been there. If somebody commits a crime, they can be sued. Period. That's what it is. But they're using that as the crack, the fingernail grip that they're trying to establish to be able to pursue this and push it into an area heretofore unforeseen or unexperienced. And we know that their intent is to try to bankrupt firearms manufacturers. Not to say that, bring them into compliance with the law. They're already law-abiding. They have to undergo the legal rectal exam on a regular basis to make sure that they comply with all of the laws. And year after year after year, gun companies have been found to comply with the law. My argument when Governor Newsom had his tantrum was that, okay, as you mentioned, that means that we should be able to allow people to sue automobile manufacturers when somebody drives recklessly and injures or kills somebody. Or more specifically, we should have the right to sue Governor Newsom because he owns a winery. And the abuse of alcohol.
Abuse of alcohol, absolutely.
That's right. Whether it's domestic abuse or drunk driving, or causing diabetes or alcoholism, or all those things, we should be able to sue him for this and his winery. It doesn't pass the chuckle test. It doesn't make any sense. So when the legislative proposal was put over the desk, the governor said it's not enough. We have to be tougher. We have to create more opportunities for people to sue firearms manufacturers. And the legal terminology that they're using is so vague and ambiguous, you can drive a Mack truck through it, as to what would constitute a violation of state laws. They want to have the ability to declare firearms a nuisance, under state law, so that they can sue the manufacturers of nuisance items. Not Newsom governor.
No, you got it right. Newsom
Yeah.
is a nuisance. I've been calling him Governor Nuisance for a long time.
So that is going to be a major effort and attention. And frankly, there are a bunch of members for those listeners in California, across the nation, actually. We're going to run elections under new districts. We had something called redistricting or reapportionment, where all of the districts were redrawn as they're required to be done every 10 years under state and federal laws across the country. And so a lot of members are running in new districts with new representation. And the last thing they want to do is have a hot wire issue like gun control as one that they have to take positions on. And especially knowing that we have millions of new gun owners in the state of California, and they're not all Republicans. And as a matter of fact, most of them aren't. So that's going to be a campaign issue that a lot of these members who are concerned about their next election, that they don't want to have that issue on the plate.
You've mentioned redistricting a couple times, and I'm not sure how that works in California, but my understanding is that the state legislatures do this, don't they? And if that's the case, the Democrats sort of have, the right to do whatever they want. That kind of screws us, no?
That used to be the way it was in the state of California. It was the single most political act that the politicians could do, is to draw their own districts, and they used to negotiate so that they can guarantee that they have majority districts, and they could reward their friends by drawing these gerrymandered districts where it looked like a lizard or the hourglass in order to get the right population of people to vote for a particular candidate. In the state of California, we passed a constitutional initiative that established an independent commission of commissioners that are basically drawn out of a hat. They have to meet certain criteria. They cannot be elected officials. They cannot be lobbyists. They cannot be the spouses of lobbyists or elected officials. There's criteria as to who is eligible, and then there's an interview process, and then they select the commission. And then when they draw the new districts, they start with a clean map. They're given the statistical information that was established by the census, the populations and the ethnicities and all of these things. And then they have guidelines that they have to try to avoid violating, or they are liable to be sued. Number one, they can no longer, the primary thing they have to take into consideration is actual political boundaries. So it's very difficult for them to divide counties or cities, where the district goes right down the street or down the railroad tracks or something like that.
So when you say political boundaries, you're not talking about where a particular population might lean right or left. You're talking about, how do you define political boundaries?
County lines, city boundaries, city limits, any other jurisdictional lines that they might reside under, townships or whatever it might be. That has to be the first criteria. They have to do everything that they can to avoid breaking those, divvying up these political communities of interest that are defined by city boundaries or county boundaries. Now, obviously, there are counties that have more people in them. There's so many that they're going to have multiple representatives there. Well, then they have to be careful about how they split some of these counties. Like Los Angeles, it has the vast majority of districts. I'm starting to evaluate now what the district's going to look like. This is a map that shows the county of Los Angeles that has a ton of individual districts. And then the next criteria, if they have to violate the political boundaries, is communities of interest. In other words, let's take the Sierras, for instance. You have people on the western slope of the Sierras that have a different interest than the eastern slope of the Sierras. So they have to kind of take those things into account when having to divide populations in order to establish new districts. So the net result is, and I'm evaluating what the impact is, that we now have, because they can't take the residents of existing politicians into account, we now have more for Democrats than Republicans, incumbents who are presently serving in the legislature who have been thrown into the same districts. So if they want to run for election or re-election, they have to move to another district to run in them. Some of the
okay, so wait, hold up. You have to, I didn't know this. You have to actually reside in the district that you are going to serve. If you want to run, you have to live there. You have to have a residence there.
That is correct for the state legislature. Not true for congressional districts. You don't have to be a resident of a district to run in that district. And that causes a lot of shenanigans, of course. But here in the state of California, we have a lot of, it's funny how we have a lot of members of the legislature who live in apartments in their districts, when we know that they're fairly well off and they probably don't actually live in those apartments, but those are their registered residences, and they spend enough time in there so that they cannot be found guilty of violating those laws. And we've actually had members of the legislature or former members who've actually gone to jail for violating those laws, and not living in their districts. I know it's kind of funny. So there's evaluating all of these things, the candidates that are going to run in these districts, and multiple candidates who are presently incumbents who are going to be running against each other or moving. So the job of evaluating the elections for California legislature next year is going to be very involved. And because
do you rate these people as an organization? Do you put a rating on them that voters can look at and go, yeah, I don't want to vote for this joke, or yes, I want to vote for that one?
On our website and in our newsletter, we annually, during an election year, we publish both for the primary and for the general, a rating of candidates. Now, those people that are incumbents, we don't need to send them a questionnaire for them to lie on, to tell us. We have a voting record, a track record, and that's what we evaluate incumbents on. For all non-incumbents, we will evaluate if they have a track record on a county or a city level. But for those people, we send a very involved questionnaire, and we have them answer that, and then we will rank that questionnaire and give them a ranking, a rating, and publish it so that gun owners will know, who the pro-2A people are and who the anti-2A people are. And if people refuse to answer them, we let our folks know. We rate people who choose not to answer as a 0. We default them to be anti-Second Amendment, and a C- candidate against somebody who chooses not to fill out a questionnaire. That is the pro-gun candidate that you get to make a choice on in this district. So we let them.
Well, if I've been an employer for a long time, and when I have somebody come in for an interview, if I ask them questions, they refuse to answer, I'm certainly not going to employ that person. I think we need to get back to reminding ourselves that these politicians are our employees.
Absolutely.
And if we're going to hire them, then it's incumbent upon them to give us a good, solid resume and for them to interview properly so that we can get the questions answered we want answered. And if they refuse to answer them, then why do we hire them? So I agree. If they're not going to answer the stupid questions and you give them a questionnaire, they won't answer it, that's a 0. Forget you. I'm not hiring you.
Joel, we've even gotten tough here at Gun Owners of California. We used to give, A+ ratings to rock solid incumbents in particular. We don't do that anymore because a lot of incumbents have a perfect voting record, but they've never stood up on the floor of the legislature or in committee to protect or defend the Second Amendment. They've never sponsored a pro-gun bill knowing that it's going to die, but they've never taken the step to actually put action to their words. And the best they can get is an A or an A-. And then we have some A+ candidates. Why are they getting A? Well, they sponsored bills to get rid of microstamping. They sponsored bills to fix the concealed carry weapon system and make it shall issue. They sponsored bills to get rid of the ammunition laws. And they are the true heroes. So they get the support. So a lot of politicians have kind of taken umbrage to that. People who are pro-2A, why are you penalizing us? And we say, you know what? because you're a politician. And we don't put stake into people, we put stake into the actions that people take. That's where we put our emphasis on. And it is what it is. I'm sure I've ticked off more politicians and candidates than anybody I can think of. I've been doing this since evaluating candidates since 1980. And
well, let me go back to the employee analogy. When I hire an employee, I give them, they have a job, and there is a job description. They have certain work they need to get done, and they have to get it done in a timely way. They got to get it done in a certain way. And if I'm paying them, then they get to do it the way that we prescribe that they do it. There's some things that I say, well, I don't, I'm not really concerned about the particular manner in which you get it done. I just want you to get it done. But there are some things that are very critical because we are a state licensed vocational school, and they have to be done a certain way because the state requires it to be done a certain way, or whatever the case might be. I don't hire employees just to attend a meeting and agree with me. Oh yeah, I agree. Which is essentially what you just described. You got a politician who attends a meeting and votes. Well, I agree. I disagree. That's fine, but you have a job to do. Have you done it? Are you fighting for the Second Amendment? Did you sponsor a bill? Did you get on the floor and argue in favor of that bill? Did you get on the floor and argue against a bill that's taking our rights away? Did you do your job? Well, I agreed. I disagree. I voted. I attended the meeting. I'm sorry, that's not good enough. How much do those people make a year?
Including the tax-free per diem that they receive, the average is, I believe it's up to something like $140,000. A significant portion of that is tax-free. I think their salary is like approaching $100,000, and then they get $40,000 in tax-free per diem that ostensibly covers their housing costs when they're at the legislature instead of in their districts.
Let's call it what it is. They're making $200,000 a year.
Well,
however you want to. Plus, they probably get contributions for their campaign or whatever. And if they play the right games the right way, they get to use that money in certain ways. It's probably legal for them to use. And so they're making a lot of money.
They are.
I'd love to know what the average family income in the state of California is for an average family. And I'd venture to say, or the average individual income, because that's not their family income. That's just what that individual's getting paid. They're getting paid a lot of money, and it's California taxpayers who are paying them. And I think we get to remind ourselves that, no, they're not our leaders. We call them that. They're not our leaders. They are our employees. And we've hired them to do a job. We are their bosses.
They're supposed to represent our interests.
You bet. And that's what they're told to do, which means they're expected to come back to their district and find out what the interests of their employers are, and then go up there and represent those.
What a marvelous concept.
And they don't do it.
No, they don't.
And so, as employers, we get to hold their feet to the fire by finding out, did they represent our interests or not? Regardless of whether, I don't care if they have a D next to their name or an R next to their name. That doesn't matter to me. I'm a libertarian. I'm not a Republican. I'm not a Democrat. I vote nonpartisan because I vote for the person who's concerned about my liberty and who wants to make the state into the awesome state it ought to be. And if we start viewing it that way, we'll have a whole different view of our political employees. I'm not going to call them our political leaders because they're not. Californians are got to be getting tired of this. Are we seeing any kind of a political wind change that might help us in our Second Amendment fight?
I believe that we are, and you have to look closely to it. Sometimes the media inadvertently steps into it and kind of gives us a glimpse into that. When you have a bastion of liberalism like Beverly Hills, where residents of Beverly Hills are buying guns in record numbers. Producers, actors, people who work in the film industry, wealthy business people who live in Beverly Hills. There is one gun store in Beverly Hills, and they are being inundated by the pressure to sell guns to people.
That's very telling for before you go on, because if there was only one gun store there, that's probably because there wasn't much of a demand for firearms before. If there's a demand, then the market will fill the demand, and there would have been many more gun stores. You're talking about one gun store in Beverly Hills is probably because most of the people in Beverly Hills didn't want a gun previously. Am I right?
Pretty much. Yeah, a gun store is pretty regional in their business model. They service a particular area. You don't typically hear people coming from, Sacramento to go to a gun store in Bakersfield because that's the store that they want to go. No, they go to their local gun stores in order to avail themselves of what they need. So that's a very telling signal. And I believe that it is no longer this difference between a Democrat and a Republican issue. It is becoming an issue that goes completely across the political spectrum, crosses and erases the political lines, because we have so many people buying guns in the state of California, and it is impossible for them to be all of the conservative Republicans doing that because they already have them, but the numbers of gun sales are soon to outpace the number of actual registered voters on the Republican Party side.
I read some of the other, you can confirm this for me, I guess, if it's true. I read somewhere the other day that there are more gun owners in the state of California than in any other state in the United States. Is that true?
I believe that to be true. We are the most populous state, and, we have 30-40% of our population are gun owners. That's millions and millions of people who are gun owners in the state of California. Many of them are first-time gun owners. The majority of the first-time gun owners are women. And if you take a look at the first-time gun owners, the majority of them are African-American and Hispanic origin. So those were bastions of the liberal left, those demographics. Well, on this issue, which is becoming so important that people have dropped political perspectives on guns that they've held their entire lifetimes and have decided that they need to become legal gun owners, and they are buying guns. We know that they are inundating training operations throughout the state of California. You talk to any trainer for firearms, for gun safety and basic pistol or rifle or shotgun training classes. All of the folks that I talk to, they're booked up. They have plenty of people who are seeking these types of training programs in order to become trained in the use of firearms in their own homes. The fear is so great, Joel, that people have that in their own homes that they need a firearm to defend themselves. The media has almost created this situation on its own by nightly depicting all of the riots that were happening and the distress that was happening in our urban centers and the commentary from the agitators who are saying, we're not staying in the cities, we're going to suburban America and to rural America. People are saying, we hear that the police can't respond to all of the calls that they're getting. So what are we going to do to defend ourselves? Many people cannot afford to make their communities a gated community, and they can't afford to put bars and electronic equipment and all of these things in their own homes. And they realize that their only choice for defense is to be able to protect themselves in their home with a firearm.
Thank you very much for listening to the entire interview. I'm very grateful that you did. Once again, I want to remind you that there was a lot more to this interview than what you've seen here, and that's because of all the reasons I expressed at the beginning, so I won't go over it again. I'll just encourage you to look for and subscribe to the GunGuyTV audio podcast. It's a firearms podcast. You'll find it on your favorite podcast player. And if you would, and you are interested in doing so, please support GunGuyTV by joining GunGuyTV crew. You'll find a link in the description. Have a great week. Thank you so very much for all of your support, and wherever you go, whatever you do, be safe.